I looked at all the DBD chapters and chose what I think is the best aspect about each and every one of them. Remember, this entire list is my opinion. Some people don't seem to realize that other people have different opinions than them and get really angry when they don't align. For the last breath, I'm gonna say just the fact that it was completely free. We've gotten a couple of free chapters, but I gotta say, if this one wasn't free, it would be the most pay-to-win thing in all of DBD because obviously you'd be getting the nurse. And this was their first ever DLC, so I can just appreciate the fact that they decided to go on a route where they start introducing characters like this. Nurse and Nia are extremely cool characters, so obviously honorable mention goes to those two for just being such unique and cool characters. For chapter 2, Halloween, it's gotta just be the introduction of iconic characters into DBD, and it really set the precedent of what is possible within this game. Without the Halloween chapter, we might not have gotten Stranger Things or Resident Evil or any of these other iconic characters. And then I have an honorable mention for the add-ons that came with Myers. I really like the add-on design where they completely change how the killer is played, and Myers does that so well. The fact that you can completely change his gameplay just by using different add-ons is super cool, and I wish they did that for more killers. For chapter 3 of Flesh and Mud, I'm just gonna say the introduction of hex totems. I think hex totems are a super cool mechanic and a great way to give the survivors something else to do besides doing gens. I do unfortunately think that hex totems are really bad right now besides like Plaything Pentimento, so I kind of wish they were a bit better. Like I personally didn't mind when Hex Ruin was 200% because it's such a risk reward perk to bring. I really wish that totem perks both on survivor and killer side were a bit better because it really pushes additional gameplay besides just the core like doing gens and healing and unhooking. For chapter 3.5 Left Behind, I'm gonna say Borrowed Time. Now obviously Borrowed Time right now is not that great, but this was such an absolutely game-changing perk when it came out and for years thereafter. We finally had a way to prevent farming, which was one of the most annoying mechanics that this game ever had. I don't like the fact that they use perks as band-aid fixes for game design, but I'd much rather have a perk than nothing at all for the years that we had until Basket BT. For chapter 4 Spark of Madness, this is gonna be a little bit controversial, but I'm actually gonna say the absolute chaos of Larry's. I have been on all sides of the spectrum of this map. I have, been a beginner and hated this map because it sucks as a beginner. It's terrible. You don't know where any gens are. You don't understand the layout of the map. But as you get better and as you really start to learn the layout of this map and the absolute RNG chaos that this map can create, it is so absurdly stupid that it's fun. Like it is very unbalanced, don't get me wrong, and very survivor-sided. But I think the chaotic RNG just makes this map so random that you never know what to expect. Like if you're playing a survivor on it, every loop could be unsafe. But the next game, if you go into the same map, it could have these crazy connected windows that create this really interesting loop that you don't see in any other map. It has so many dynamic window spawns, which makes you have to stay on top of your game and almost have to piece together what the good loops are in your head while you're chasing a survivor or while you're being chased. I know most people hate Larry's and I don't necessarily love it, but I love the chaos that it ensues. For chapter 5 of Lullaby the Dark, it's obvious. Everything about the Huntress. The Huntress, in my opinion, is the most iconic character in DBD. Obviously, you can make an argument for like certain licensed characters and Trapper and whatever. Her Lullaby is iconic. Her power has one of the lowest skill floors but highest skill ceilings in the entire game. Simple to use, hard to master. She's super balanced and counterable on both sides because there's that wind up time as well as the travel time, so it gives both the killer and the survivor time to react to each other's plays. And she's not overpowered but not weak at the same time. So it just makes this perfect killer that doesn't need to be changed, and I don't really know why they're buffing her, I'm not gonna lie. As a Huntress main, I don't think those buffs will be good for her. I think she's perfectly fine the way she is. Huntress is just such a cool, iconic character, so I gotta give it to that. For chapter 5.5, I'm gonna say Barbecue and Chili. I think Barbecue was an absolutely great addition to this game. It's a really useful perk without being overpowered at all, and for most of its life cycle, it gave you double blood points. So it was a useful perk, and it was good for getting blood points. Even with the blood point bonus being removed, it's still a pretty decent perk, and it's just fun to use because it's never really downtime because you know where to go after hooking a survivor. Chapter 6, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm gonna give this to the number of map variations. This map has 5 different variations that we haven't seen on pretty much any other realm. Like, yeah, some realms have 5 maps within it, but this is one map with 5 variations. And I think this adds a ton of replayability to that map because it creates loops that are connected in different ways, and it's just an entirely different layout. Some variations might be stronger for the killers, some variations might be stronger for the survivors. It just switches things up a bit without having to, take up too much development time. I really wish they would do this for other maps. I know that they added some for Macmillan, which is awesome to see, and I hope they kind of continue doing that for the rest of the maps as well. And on top of that, I hope that eventually they add flipped maps. I have a video where I play on maps that are reversed, and it just breaks your brain and makes the map feel like a completely different thing. So I would love if they added that. For chapter 7, the Saw chapter, I'm just gonna give it to the creativity of implementing a saw trap into DBD and making it work. Sure, it might not be this amazing power, but the fact that they're able to take an iconic saw trap, put it into the game, and make it work, on top of having it connected to the killer because that's the trap that she was in, it all just works so well together. So I really applaud Behavior's creativity at the time. For chapter 8, Curtain Call, I'm just going to give it to Father Campbell's Chapel. This is one of my favorite maps in the entire game, and I don't really know why. I just really like the default regular loops like TLs and long walls and shack and stuff. So this ticked off all of the boxes for that, and they're really well spaced out in my opinion, on top of having a very fun main building with a lot of different dynamics to it. It has places for balanced landing, it has places for light, it has a spawn with really good windows and a spawn with really mediocre windows. It has a bunch of different window spawns that can create really interesting connected loops, and it has Maurice. Like, do I need to say more? Sure, this map may favor one side more than the other, but whenever I get this map on Killer or Survivor, I never really complain. Okay, for Chapter 9, Shattered Bloodline, of course, it is the introduction of one of the coolest killers in the game. She has, in my opinion, one of the most interesting and unique powers in the entire game. Being able to go into a separate dimension where you can only hear the survivors, but you cannot see them, is such a creative idea. Granted, it's really strong, but it's still such a unique idea. On top of having a sick killer design with the detached limbs and the sword that comes out of her wrist. Absolutely amazing character. For Chapter 10, Darkness Among Us, you may think this is dumb, but I'm gonna say the introduction of a snow map. We haven't really gotten a actual snow map in DBD besides this. This is like the first real snow map in DBD, and I just love snow levels on pretty much any game. Obviously, they're nice to look at, but they also create this completely different vibe and feeling of the game while you're in it. And I think Ormond did a great job of doing so. For Chapter 11, Demise of the Faithful, I gotta give it to the perks. I really like this collection of perks. We got Head On, which is super fun. Corrupt Intervention, which is a great way to slow that early game down. Infectious, which is a great perk to have if you need a snowball. And Dark Devotion, which although isn't that good, it is really creative and very, very fun. The other two perks that came with Jane are kind of bad, but the other perks I mentioned are a great addition to our loadouts. For Chapter 11.5, Ash versus Evil Dead, this one's kind of hard because his perks have made a resurgence, but that's been really only recently. And then Metal of Man was obviously OP when it came out. So I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to say the fact that he has super rare voice lines for if you're doing or not doing something. I think it's such a cool detail that he makes a snarky comment if you don't ready up. And I could be wrong, but I think this was the first ever Survivor to have voice lines. So obviously that's a great plus.
What is this, the staring contest? Come on, let's go.
For Chapter 12, Ghostface, I'm going to say bringing an actually good stealth ability. Like we pretty much only had Wraith and Myers, and their stealth abilities, you know, they're decent, but they're not scary, you know? I think Ghostface did a great job of having a frequently used scary ability that can cause a ton of jump scares on a ton of different maps. With The Unknown coming out soon, I'm hoping that this year they're going to focus on the horror aspects of DBD and have a couple more scary abilities like Ghostface. For Chapter 3, Stranger Things, I mean, I don't really have many bad things to say about it. I think my favorite thing would be the Demogorgon because he's very similar to Huntress where he's super iconic as well as being really balanced and really counterable on both sides. And again, he's really easy to pick up so anybody can play him and have a good time. But of course, like this is such an iconic chapter, I have to give an honorable mention to both the survivors. Having two survivors is a great change of pace, and gotta mention the menu music, like the coolest menu music in the entire game in my opinion. For Chapter 14, Cursed Legacy, it's pretty much the same as Stranger Things. I gotta give it to Oni. Again, another really well-designed killer that is amazing on pretty much every single front besides the potential of slugging, but that's just kind of the downside of having a limited time ability. Insane sound design, insane presence on the map, powerful but not overpowered, and by most people's standards, usually fun to play as and play against. But of course, everything in this chapter is really good except for the perks. Yui is such a cool survivor and has a couple of decent perks, but all of the perks are either really niche or just straight up bad. I even really enjoy the map that he came with on both sides. For Chapter 15, Chains of Hate, I'm gonna give this to the entire package of Zarina. Zarina, not only as a character is really cool, she has a ton of amazing cosmetics and a wide variety of them, and she has some of the coolest perks in the game. When she came out, Off the Record wasn't obviously what it is today, but right now it's one of the best anti-tunnel perks in the game. For the People is one of the most creative, unique perks that we have in the game, and is also really, really fun to pair with different perks. And Red Herring is Red Herring. It's it's okay, but it can be fun if you're trying to rat. I just don't see a reason why you'd ever use this instead of Diversion. But overall, like, phenomenal character. I think she's probably my second favorite behind Nia. For Chapter 16, Silent Hill, I gotta give this to the overall aesthetic of the chapter. Like, they absolutely nailed the aesthetic. Cheryl looks incredible. Pyramid Head looks incredible. The map looks incredible. I honestly think Midwich is one of the most cinematic maps in the game. And an honorable mention to all of the Easter eggs and references that are within this map. Like, it's packed full of different things. You have the secret chest, you have the girl crying in the bathroom, you have the jump scare, you have so many Easter eggs and so many references. They did an absolutely phenomenal job with the aesthetic. For Chapter 17, Descend Beyond, obviously making one of the most fun killers in the game. Of course, just like everything on this list, this is subjective, but he is extremely fast-paced and in most situations has some pretty solid counterplay on both sides. Yes, his add-ons are very, very strong even after the rework, work, but I still think this was such a successful killer that they added to this game. And I personally knew that I was going to play this character a lot, even in the PTB when he was really weak, just because of how fun he was. This character removes a lot of that whole W gameplay that's super boring to play against. So he actually promotes chases in loops. For chapter 18, A Binding of Kin, I'll just go with the terror radius. Really cool terror radius. Chapter 19 is All Kill. I'm going to give my favorite thing about this chapter to Smash Hit. Such a fun and unique exhaustion perk that's not that good, but it's still super fun to pull off. Being able to smash a pallet in the killer's face and then running away really far, while also having a way shorter exhaustion cooldown than most other exhaustion perks, is really fun to use. But other than that, there wasn't much about this chapter that was great. For chapter 20, Resident Evil, this is the first one with Nemesis. I'm going to give it to RPD. Now, obviously, I am a big hater of RPD, which you all know, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't like the gameplay of the map itself, but I can completely appreciate everything that went into this map from an artistic perspective. I've played this Resident Evil game, and this map is almost an exact replica, so they did an insane job making it look like it's exactly from the game. The amount of references and Easter eggs, and it is one of the best looking maps from a detailed perspective, so I really appreciate Behavior for doing that. Gameplay-wise, it's a little rough, but that tends to happen with a lot of licensed maps. For chapter 21, Hellraiser, I'm going to give it to the animations. This is one of the few times where we get these really unique and cool animations that aren't just like the killer kicking the pallet or, you know, kicking the gen, or even just smacking a survivor with a weapon. He actually brings in a unique set of animations, like breaking pallets with his mind by summoning chains, picking up survivors with chains, and smacking survivors with a chain that he summons from his hand. Like, it's all very cool, and I wish they did a lot more unique stuff like this, which they haven't much besides from one killer, which I'll get to later. For chapter 21.5, Hour of the Witch, it's just gonna be boon perks. Although boon perks have never really been balanced properly, I still really enjoy the idea of the mechanic. It gives the players a completely new way to interact with totems, and I think anything that can give additional objectives from the main gameplay loop will usually be a good thing. The only problem is that they were mostly Circle of Healing, completely broken on launch, and now they're all just very situational at best. But I still love the boon mechanic, and I hope that they add more or buff the previous ones to make them, you know, more usable. For chapter 22, Portrait of a Murder, I gotta give it to artist's visual and audio aesthetic. I absolutely love the look of this character and the way they integrated ink and crows into her character herself. Like, her neck twitches as though she's a bird, and the ink can transform into whatever she wants. Like, it's such a creative conglomerate of a bunch of different things formed together and meshed together to make this very aesthetically cool character. Plus, the sound design of her is so scary. If you didn't know anything about this killer and you heard those crows from across the map and you heard kind of the pain breathing that the artist does, it's pretty unnerving and unsettling. So phenomenal job with that. Chapter 23, Sadako Rising, it's going to the unique animations. Like, I know I just said that with Hellraiser, but she has probably cooler animations than Pinhead. The symbol that appears when you hit somebody, the breaking of pallets and breakable doors and generators just with her mind, picking up and hooking survivors without even touching them, it's absolutely fire, and I love this aspect of her. For chapter 24, Roots of Dredge, I'm gonna give this to Garden of Joy and Dredge's aesthetic. The aesthetic of the map is so freaking awesome. All of the like weird floating stuff in the background and kind of the like amalgamation of a bunch of different broken universes in a way, it makes it look honestly fantastic. I specifically remember exploring this map on the PTB, and I was just in awe at how cool it was that they did something like this. It's a nice change of pace from the typical like outer walls that we normally have on most DBD maps, and seeing stuff like floating land and floating cars up in the distance is just such a cool sight. And then of course Dredge's aesthetic as well is great. A really innovative way to have a killer that's just made of black smoke. For chapter 25, Resident Evil Project W, a lot of you are probably going to disagree with this, which is fine, but in my opinion, it was a very successful killer. He's really fun to play, and he's pretty well designed. There's a couple things here and there that I don't like about this killer, especially playing against him, but in general, compared to a lot of the killers that have been recently releasing within the past year of this chapter, this is so much better. I will say I am a little bit sick of him because everybody plays him, but there's a reason everybody plays him. For chapter 26, Forge and Fog, I'm gonna give it to Hex Face the Darkness. I genuinely think that this is one of the coolest, if not the coolest perk design in the entire game. It is kind of like a time trial hex perk, where if you're not able to cleanse the hex perk before it deactivates, the killer can get it again. For those of you who don't know, when you injure a survivor by any means, a random totem will become a hex totem, and this perk will activate. While this is active, every other survivor will scream every once in a while if they're outside of your terror radius, and their aura will be revealed to you for a few seconds. But then the perk deactivates and the hex totem becomes a dull totem if that survivor that you hit goes down or becomes healthy. So the other survivors can only cleanse the totem while that survivor is injured. Otherwise, the killer will be able to reactivate it again. Like, such a unique idea for a hex perk that makes this super interesting gameplay of trying to scramble to get rid of the hex totem. I do think it's a little bit weak, but I would love to see more hex perks that kind of have this style of you need to cleanse it during a certain period of time or else they'll be able to get more use out of it. Amazing perk, not in terms of strength, but just in uniqueness. For chapter 27, Tools of Torment, I'm just gonna say trying new perk types. It's very rare that Behavior will try a new mechanic entirely, but they definitely dip their toes into something that I don't think is fully fleshed out yet and could be made better, but it's still kind of interesting. And these are with the teamwork perks. So there's Teamwork Power of 2 and Teamwork Collective Stealth, where you get these good benefits as long as you stay within 12 meters of one another, or if one of you loses a health state. It's a pretty interesting mechanic to reward a little bit more team play, and I'm very glad that Behavior is trying out new types of perks, and they're even doing it with the new perks that come with Sable. But I just kind of think that they're too scared of making something very meta-defining after releasing the boon perks, which is fair. Balancing a game with 6 billion interactions is definitely hard, so I'm sure it's better for them to err on the side of caution, but I do wish that these perks were just a little bit better. Maybe not the haste one, because haste can completely break a chase, but I could see so many perk ideas that would work well with these teamwork perks. Chapter 28, End Transmission. This one's gonna be a hot take and most people won't agree with me, which is completely fine, but I'm gonna say made for this. Not because of the perk itself, but purely because it changed the meta. For those of you that have played DBD for, 5, 6, 7 years, you understand that it has been the same game essentially since the beginning, and the meta rarely shifts. So having such a meta-defining perk that's also disabled while you're exhausted kind of completely changed the way you play Killer and the way you play Survivor. I'm not arguing whether it was good or bad, but it was just different, which I can appreciate. Obviously, the perk was pretty busted and was kind of 2 perks at 1, but it still shifted the way people play. Less people were using exhaustion perks because it disabled it, which meant that less killers ran Mindbreaker and less killers ran, exhaustion add-ons. It just shifted a bit, and that makes the gameplay feel fresh. Not necessarily better or worse, but just fresh. For chapter 28.5, Nicolas Cage, it's obvious, his perks. I think this is the best set of perks that we've ever gotten, and I wish that more chapters would have perks like this. They're all just so goofy and so random, and I love that. Like, one of them, you can literally down yourself as Survivor. Or there's another one where you get a short sprint person, then you gamble with either getting a bad effect or a good effect. Like, it's so much fun, and I wish they would do this with more perks. For chapter 29, Alien, it's gotta be the map Easter eggs. This is by far the best map in terms of Easter eggs. There's so many references and so many interactable Easter eggs, and it's kind of the only map that has that. Like, yeah, we have a couple maps here and there that have interactable Easter eggs, like the secret chests on Midwich or Temple or some other interactables, but Nostromo is by far the best one, and I really hope that they continue doing this on future maps. From my understanding, the new theater map doesn't have too many interactable Easter eggs that I've seen, except for the one where you throw the pallet on the arcade machine, which is hilarious. So, and it just brings a lot more life into the map, and it's a good way to also introduce other objectives. Though I do wish that there was something that the killer could do as well, because most of the interactable Easter eggs are only for the survivors to get like an extra chest or something. But it'd be cool if the killers could get something as well. For chapter 30, Chucky, I gotta give it to the voice lines. Like, they did an absolutely phenomenal job with his voice lines and perfectly encapsulated what Chucky is in DBD. I never thought they would make Chucky work. And granted, he's really annoying to play against. He is super fun to play as, and hearing the voice lines of him like cussing you out and making fun of you is so funny. And there's like hundreds of voice lines, plus completely new voice lines if you use Tiffany. Though I do think voice lines can sometimes ruin the character because it takes away from their intrigue, I think it worked super well on Chucky. For chapter 30.5, Alan Wake, I personally don't think this was a great half chapter in terms of perks, and I've never played Alan Wake, so I have no connection to the character itself. So I'm gonna say the menu music. It has a very interesting, mysterious tone to it, and it really makes me question, about Alan Wake's character, and it kind of makes me want to play the game. If you guys would suggest playing this game, let me know in the comments below. And for chapter 31, All Things Wicked, I'm gonna say the return to horror. I personally don't think the appearance of the unknown is scary, though on paper and in his concept of him like trying to imitate humans, that is pretty creepy. I just kind of expected something different based on the teasers, but I'm excited because I'm hoping that this year is all scary chapters. Last year they had a big focus on sci-fi with like Alien and Singularity, so I'm hoping on this year they go on that horror trajectory. I feel like that's one of the complaints I see a lot in this community, is that the game isn't scary even though it's technically a horror game. So I'd love to see them really focus on trying to make some scary killers again. Let me know what your favorite thing from every chapter is down in the comments below, and YouTube thinks that you'll like this video, so check it out and see if they're right.